What is the Outer Banks prequel series?
Kildare explained.
Warning, spoilers free. Outer Banks is ending with season 5, but Netflix is already developing a prequel series tentatively titled Kildare. The project would take viewers roughly 20 years before the original series and explore how the deep divide between the wealthy Kooks and working-class Pogues began. So, what exactly is the Outer Banks prequel? And will John B., Sarah, JJ, Kiara, and Pope appear? The answer is a little more complicated than simply saying we're getting another Outer Banks season. The original series is officially ending with season 5, but the creators aren't necessarily finished with the world they created. Instead of continuing John B. and the Pogues story, the proposed prequel would go backward in time. And that could give fans something they've never really seen before: the history behind Kildare Island itself. What is Kildare? The project is currently being referred to as Kildare, and it is being developed by Outer Banks creators Josh Pate, Jonas Pate, and Shannon Burke. As of the latest reporting, the creators are actively working on the script with Netflix. However, it's important to clarify that there is not yet a confirmed premiere date, and the project should not be treated as a completed or officially released series. The basic concept is fascinating. Instead of asking, what happens to the Pogues next? Kildare asks, how did the world of the Pogues and Kooks become what it is? The story would take place approximately 20 years before the events of the original Outer Banks. That means we're going back to a completely different generation. John B. and Sarah aren't the main characters. JJ isn't the center of the story. Kiara, Pope, Cleo, and Rafe aren't running around Kildare looking for treasure. Instead, the prequel is expected to explore the older generation and the history that eventually shaped the island. Why go back 20 years? This is probably the most interesting part of the idea. From the beginning, Outer Banks has been about more than treasure. Yes, there are gold hunts. There are mysterious maps. There are shipwrecks. There are hidden artifacts. But underneath all of that is a very simple conflict: the Kooks versus the Pogues. Kildare Island is divided socially and economically. The wealthy residents live around Figure 8, while the working-class residents live on the cut. Netflix itself describes the Pogues as the people living on the lower-income south side of Kildare, while the wealthy Kooks live on the island's north side. That divide is one of the foundations of the entire series. John B. and his friends are constantly treated differently because they are Pogues. Sarah Cameron comes from the Kook world. Rafe is essentially the embodiment of Kook privilege. Kiara has connections to both worlds. And the characters repeatedly clash because of those social divisions. But here's the question the original show hasn't completely answered. Where did this divide actually come from? That's what Kildare could explore. Who created the Kook and Pogue divide? The creators haven't revealed the complete story yet. But the central purpose of the prequel is reportedly to explore the origins of Kildare's deep social divide. That means we could finally see how the island's wealthy families gained their influence. We could see how the working-class community developed, and we could learn why the two sides became so deeply separated. This could potentially turn the prequel into something more than another treasure-hunting adventure. It could become an origin story for the entire social structure of Outer Banks. And that gives the writers a huge amount of freedom. They can introduce characters we've never met before. They can create new mysteries. And they can potentially recontextualize things we already know from the original show. Will John B. appear? Probably not as a major character. Remember, the story is set around 20 years before the original series. John B.'s generation simply wouldn't be the focus. The same goes for Sarah, JJ, Kiara, and Pope. Instead, the series would likely introduce a new generation of younger characters. But that doesn't mean the original characters' families couldn't matter. In fact, that's where things could become really interesting. 20 years earlier means we could potentially see the parents or older relatives of characters we already know. That could allow Kildare to connect directly to the original series without simply bringing back the same characters. And that's probably the smartest way to do a prequel. Instead of replacing John B. with another version of John B., the show can tell stories about the people who helped create the world he eventually inherited. Could we see the parents? This is one of the biggest possibilities. The original Outer Banks has always relied heavily on family history. John B's father, Big John, was obsessed with treasure. Sarah's family has deep connections to the wealthy Kook community. JJ's complicated family history became one of the biggest revelations in Season 4. And the Jenrette family has its own long history on Kildare. The original show has already established that events from previous generations can have enormous consequences for the current characters. So a prequel set 20 years earlier could take advantage of all that history. We could see younger versions of important adults. We could see how family rivalries began. And we could potentially discover why certain families became powerful while others remained on the outside. Is it still a treasure hunt? That's another big question. We don't know yet exactly how much treasure hunting will be involved. But it's hard to imagine an Outer Banks project without some kind of mystery or adventure. The original series has always mixed social drama with treasure hunting. The first major story revolved around the Royal Merchant Gold. Then came the Cross of Santo Domingo. Then the El Dorado storyline. Then the Blue Crown. The mythology keeps expanding. A prequel could potentially introduce another historical mystery, while also exploring the island's origins. But the focus appears to be broader this time. The treasure would probably serve the story rather than being the entire story. The real subject is Kildare itself. Will there be familiar characters?
Possibly.
Recent reporting indicates that the prequel could include some familiar characters or connections alongside new characters, but the exact cast and character details haven't been announced. That's important because the project is still developing. So if you see social media posts claiming that specific Outer Banks actors have already been confirmed for Kildare, be careful. At this point, there isn't a confirmed full cast for the prequel.
What we know is the concept.
20 years earlier, a new generation, the origins of the Kook-Pogue divide, and the return to Kildare. Is Kildare officially happening? Here's the important distinction. The project is in development. The creators are working on the script with Netflix. But that doesn't necessarily mean Netflix has officially ordered a complete season. There is also no confirmed release date yet. Josh Pate has said that the team is working hard on the script and developing the project with Netflix. So fans shouldn't expect to see Kildare immediately after Season 5. There's still a development process. The script needs to be completed. Netflix needs to decide whether to move forward with production.
Casting needs to happen.
And then filming and post-production would follow. So right now, think of Kildare as a serious prequel project in development, rather than a guaranteed 2027 Netflix release. Why is the prequel happening now? The timing is interesting. Outer Banks Season 5 is the final season of the original series. Netflix is ending the story of John B. and the Pogues after 5 seasons. But the franchise itself has become valuable. So instead of simply ending everything, the creators have an opportunity to explore another part of the world. And Kildare makes sense because the island has always been one of the most important elements of a show. The original series isn't just about teenagers. It's about Kildare. It's about who owns it, who controls it, who has money, who doesn't, who gets opportunities, and who gets pushed aside. A prequel can explore those themes without having to repeat the same treasure hunt. What could the story be about? We don't have a complete plot yet, but based on the concept, there are several obvious possibilities. We could see the early formation of the Kook elite. We could see how the Cut became associated with the Pogues. We could see family rivalries that eventually shaped the modern island. And we could potentially discover secrets about characters' parents and grandparents. The show could also introduce an entirely new treasure mystery that becomes part of Kildare's history. Imagine discovering that a legendary treasure mentioned in the original series had an earlier connection to the island. That could be a great way to connect the two timelines. But the writers have an even bigger opportunity. They can show us why the island became divided in the first place. And that could make the original Outer Banks story feel completely different when fans eventually rewatch it. What happens to the original Pogues?
Season 5 is still the end of their main story.
Netflix's official Season 5 information confirms that the final season follows John B., Sarah, Kiara, Pope, and Cleo after JJ's death, with Rafe joining them in an uneasy alliance as they attempt to survive and take on Chandler Groff. So Kildare isn't replacing Season 5. It's not Season 6. It's not a continuation of the Pogues adventure. It's a prequel. That means fans can watch Season 5 as the conclusion of John B. and his friend's journey, while potentially getting a completely different story afterward. And honestly, that's probably the best approach. The original characters get their ending. The world gets another story. The biggest question, the most exciting question, isn't necessarily, will John B. return?
It's,
who are the people who created the world John B. grew up in? For 5 seasons, we've watched the Pogues fight against the Kooks. We've watched wealthy families control the island. We've watched old family secrets destroy relationships. And we've watched treasure from previous generations continue to affect the present. Now Kildare could finally show us how all of that started. 20 years earlier. Before the Royal Merchant. Before John B.'s treasure hunt. Before the Pogues became the Pogues. Before the Kooks and Pogues were enemies in the way we know them. That's what makes the prequel potentially so interesting. Final answer. So, what is the Outer Banks prequel series? It's a project currently known as Kildare, being developed with Netflix by Outer Banks creators Josh Pate, Jonas Pate, and Shannon Burke. The story is planned to take place approximately 20 years before the original series and explore the origins of Kildare's social divide between the wealthy Kooks and working-class Pogues. It is expected to feature a new generation of characters, while potentially connecting to familiar families and characters from the original series. But there is no confirmed release date or full cast yet because the project remains in development. And that means the Outer Banks story may not really be ending. John B.'s story is ending. The Pogues' 5-season journey is ending. But Kildare may still have plenty of secrets left to uncover. Because before there was a Pogues versus Kooks war, there had to be a reason it started, and Kildare could finally tell us exactly what happened.